Okay, so you've probably been there. You're a leader. You're really putting in the hours. You've hired what seem like great people. You've
Right.
set up systems, maybe read all the leadership books, but something's still off.
Yeah, performance isn't quite hitting the mark. Maybe the same problems keep cropping up.
Exactly. It feels like you should be getting better results, but you're just stuck. You can't quite put your finger on why.
It is frustrating. You're looking externally, right? At the team, the processes, the market.
But what if the real friction, the main obstacle, isn't out there at all? What if it's, internal, inside you?
Mm-hmm. Something you might not even be aware of.
Yeah, something shaping everything without you realizing it.
Well, that's pretty much the core idea, the surprising insight from the source we're looking at today. It's a LinkedIn post by Gunther Williams.
Gunther Williams, okay.
And he discusses this concept called being in the box, which comes from the Arbinger Institute.
In the box. Okay, I'm intrigued. So our mission for this deep dive is basically to unpack that, right?
Yeah.
Based just on this post?
Exactly. What does in the box mean according to the source? How does it manifest? What does it cost us as leaders?
And crucially, how do we get out of the box?
Yes. And it all seems to circle back to this one really challenging question the source raises. Am I part of the problem?
Oof. Okay, so in the box. How does the post actually define that?
It's described as a shift in perspective. It's when we stop seeing others, our team, colleagues, as actual people with their own valid needs, their own challenges, their own viewpoints.
Let's start seeing them
As objects or, obstacles, hurdles in our path, things to be managed or worked around rather than people to collaborate with.
seeing people as objects. That sounds, well, kind of dehumanizing. And maybe not something leaders consciously decide to do.
No, definitely not consciously, usually. But the post details how this mindset shows up in specific behaviors, like quickly blaming team members when something goes wrong.
The blame game. Okay.
Yeah, or finding ways to justify your own behavior, even if deep down you kind of know it wasn't great.
Rationalizing it.
Exactly, and your focus just sharpens intensely on what other people are doing wrong, instead of maybe looking at your own role in the situation.
So all the energy flows outward. Finding fault, not inward. Looking at your own contribution. Makes sense.
Right. The source also mentions feeling like personally attacked or victimized if your ideas get challenged.
Oh, interesting. So it feels like a personal affront, not just a different opinion.
Precisely. And you can see how this creates a certain kind of environment, right? If people feel that blame, that defensiveness, they hesitate.
They clam up.
Yeah. They get scared to speak up, to offer a different idea, maybe challenge something. It just doesn't feel safe. Psychological safety goes out the window.
And right there you lose so much. Trust erodes. Innovation stalls because nobody's willing to risk suggesting something new or pointing out a potential problem.
That's exactly the cost the post highlights. Lower trust, lower engagement, innovation just grinds to a halt. And like we said, the really tricky part, it's often unconscious.
So you could be in the box thinking you're doing okay as a leader.
Thinking you're supportive, effective,
Oh.
while completely missing the negative wake you're leaving behind.
Wow. Okay, the post mentions a specific story, right? An anecdote about a tech executive.
Yes, and this really brings it to life. This executive, she was struggling with really high turnover on her team, couldn't figure it out.
And her take on it was?
From her perspective, she was doing everything right, supportive manager, She saw the turnover as an external problem, an industry talent crisis.
So blaming the market, not looking at her own leadership, she was in the box about the cause.
Perfectly put. She saw the problem as an external object, the talent pool, not potentially related to her interactions with the actual people on her team.
So what changed? How did she figure it out?
Well, the source says it happened through some pretty honest feedback sessions, which must have taken some courage, either from her team or maybe an HR person or consultant.
I bet. What did she learn?
She discovered that her team didn't experience her as supportive at all. They felt she micromanaged them constantly. And maybe even worse, that she tended to dismiss or shut down any ideas that didn't perfectly align with what she already thought, her vision.
Wow. So her actions, driven by seeing her team as needing control, not as capable partners,
Yeah,
were actually driving people away.
exactly. The source presents this as a prime example of being deeply in the box, a total disconnect between her self-perception and her team's reality.
Okay, but this story has a positive turn, right? The source talks about how she got out of the box.
It does. It transitions into the path forward, the transformation she underwent.
So what did she do? What are the steps according to Gunther Williams' post?
The source lays out 3 key practices she adopted. And it stresses they're pretty simple, really accessible. First was self-reflection.
Mm.
She started deliberately, regularly examining her own reactions to her team, asking herself this specific question, and this is from the post:
Mm.
Am I seeing this person as an obstacle or as someone with valid needs and insights?
Just asking that question seems like it would force a pause, a shift in perspective.
Absolutely. It reframes everything, stops you in your tracks. The second step was empathetic engagement.
So, more one-on-ones.
Well, yes, but changing the point of them. Not just check-ins or delivering feedback, but genuinely focusing on understanding. What are their challenges? What are their goals and aspirations? Trying to see things from their side.
Really listening to understand, not just to respond or correct.
You got it. And the third critical piece was openness to feedback. She had to actively create psychological safety
Oh.
by explicitly inviting critique of her leadership, making it genuinely okay for people to tell her the hard truths that they were afraid to say before when she was operating from in the box.
That takes real vulnerability, humility. But the post mentions results,
Hmm.
right? Did it work?
Apparently, yes, quite dramatically. Within just 6 months of practicing these 3 steps, the source reports her team's engagement scores jumped 30%.
30%, that's huge.
It is, and project delivery times got shorter, suggesting better collaboration, less friction. The whole culture shifted away from blame and fear towards shared ownership. Trust came back.
So, by changing her internal view, getting out of the box, and then changing her behavior to match, seeing them as people,
Mhm.
she didn't just stop the bleeding with turnover. She actually boosted performance significantly.
Exactly. And a key point the source makes is that this isn't some complex, high-level executive strategy. It explicitly states this framework is accessible to anyone, regardless of experience level or technical expertise.
So it's not about fancy techniques. It's about this fundamental internal shift.
It really seems to be. It's about that self-awareness. How you see others impacts how you treat them, which impacts how they respond, and so on.
These small shifts create ripples, just like the post described with that executive.
Yeah, and the source is clear. The path out starts by being willing to genuinely ask that tough question. Am I part of the problem? Not defensively, but with real curiosity.
If you could approach it that way with curiosity.
The potential for change, for improvement, is massive. That's the implication.
Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive into this Gunther Williams post,
Yeah.
the big idea seems to be that sometimes the key to unlocking those persistent leadership challenges isn't another new system or process, but looking inward, addressing that self-deception, that in-the-box thinking.
Yeah, shifting from seeing people as obstacles to seeing them as, well, people.
Yeah.
With needs, insights, potential. Acknowledging your own potential role in the problems you're facing.
That acknowledgement feels like the real key.
It seems to be the starting point for everything else.
So here's something for you, our listener, to maybe chew on, taking that core question from the source. Am I part of the problem? What if you started asking yourself that regularly? Not with blame, but with that genuine curiosity the source talks about.
Mm-hmm.
And not just in your leadership role, but maybe in other relationships too. At home, with friends, anywhere you interact with people. How might consistently checking in on whether you might be in the box in those interactions change things over time?
Yeah, what possibilities might open up for connection, for understanding, for actually solving problems together if you start by honestly considering your own contribution first?